For the third time this week, the HOA president drove straight through my ranch gate and destroyed my sick wife's healing garden. That was the morning I decided it would be the last time. It was 6:30 a.m. in rural Texas. I stood at my kitchen window with a cup of coffee as her white Lexus ripped through my private gate like it was a public road. Tires crushed the bluebonnets my wife planted during chemotherapy. My cattle scattered. Her oxygen machine on the porch suddenly cut out. She never even slowed down. What this HOA Karen didn't know was that I had spent the entire weekend installing solid steel bollards right across that driveway. And the very next time she tried to use my land as her shortcut, her Lexus never made it through my gate again. What would you do if someone kept driving through your dying wife's sanctuary? My name's Clayton Rivers. I'm 58 years old, retired after 28 years in the Marines where I specialized in hydraulic systems on aircraft carriers. Now I tend cattle and care for my wife Sarah, who's fighting stage 3 breast cancer on our little piece of heaven in East Texas. We bought this ranch 5 years ago when Sarah got her diagnosis. The doctors said stress was her enemy, so we found 200 acres of rolling pasture with a creek running through it. Sarah fell in love with the idea of creating a butterfly sanctuary, native Texas wildflowers that would attract monarchs during their migration. On her good days between chemo sessions, she'd sit on our wraparound porch, oxygen tank beside her chair, watching those orange and black wings dance through her garden. The ranch sits about 2 miles outside the city limits, surrounded by open land in one fancy subdivision called Meadowbrook Heights. 200 homes, all beige stucco with red tile roofs, where the HOA makes sure every mailbox is exactly the same shade of forest green. Our trouble started 3 months ago with Brenda Winchester, 52 years old, pharmaceutical sales manager, and the iron-fisted president of the Meadowbrook Heights HOA. This woman drives a white Lexus GX 470 with a blessed vanity plate and enough live, laugh, love bumper stickers to make you nauseous. One morning, I'm checking fence posts when I hear this ATV engine coming across my property. I follow the sound and find Brenda Winchester measuring my gate with a tape measure. She's wearing a navy business suit and high heels, completely out of place on a cattle ranch. "Ma'am, this is private property," I tell her, keeping my voice calm like the Marines taught me. "Could you please use the public access road?" She looks at me like I just asked her to eat dirt. "I've been using this road since before you moved here. There's a historical right-of-way to our water pump station. Deal with it." Now, I've dealt with roadside bombs in Afghanistan and drunk sailors on shore leave, but nothing prepared me for the pure entitlement in this woman's voice. She climbs back on her ATV and roars off toward the subdivision, leaving deep ruts in Sarah's carefully maintained gravel path. The smell of diesel exhaust hung in the air long after she disappeared. I walked back to the house where Sarah was sitting on the porch, watching a monarch butterfly that had landed on her honeysuckle vine. "Who was that, honey?" she asked, her voice weak from yesterday's chemo session. "Nobody important," I said, but my hands were already shaking. Not from fear, from barely controlled rage. In the military, we called it seeing red. When someone threatens what you're sworn to protect, every instinct screams to eliminate the threat. But this wasn't Afghanistan. This was Texas, where we settle things legally, usually. Over the next few weeks, Brenda escalated from ATV to SUV, claiming she needed efficiency to check the subdivision's water pump station. Every morning at exactly 7:15, that white Lexus would come tearing through my gate, past my house, through Sarah's garden, kicking up gravel and dust. The cattle learned to scatter when they heard her coming. Thunder, my prize Angus bull, jumped a fence section trying to get away and gashed his leg on the barbed wire. $800 in veterinary bills and scattered feed later, I was starting to understand this wasn't about water pumps. This was about control, about showing the locals who really runs things around here. Sarah stopped sitting on the porch during her treatments. "I feel like we're living in a fishbowl, honey," she told me one evening, tears in her eyes as she watched her trampled flowers. That night, I made myself a promise. Sarah's sanctuary was going to stay sacred, no matter what it cost me. 3 weeks into Brenda's daily invasions, she decided to up the ante. Every Tuesday became HOA inspection day, where she'd bring the entire board through my gate for what she called community tours. Picture this: 5 vehicles, 12 people, treating my ranch like it's some kind of public park. They'd climb out of their SUVs in their subdivision uniforms, khaki pants, polo shirts, and that special kind of confidence that comes from never being told no in your life. I watched from my kitchen window as Brenda led them around my property with a clipboard, pointing at fence posts and taking measurements like she was planning renovations. The group included the HOA treasurer, a nervous little man who kept glancing at his phone, and the vice president, a woman who wore sunglasses indoors and carried a purse that cost more than my truck payment. This area would be perfect for the community gazebo, I heard Brenda tell them, standing in the middle of Sarah's butterfly garden. She was wearing designer boots that probably cost more than most people's rent, crushing delicate Indian paintbrush under her heels. The tours weren't just disruptive, they were dangerous. 12 people tramping around a working cattle ranch, leaving gates open, making noise, spooking animals that outweigh them by 1,000 pounds. My cattle scattered across all 200 acres, breaking through fence sections and mixing up the herds I'd spent months organizing. Thunder, my prize Angus bull, panicked during one of these inspections and crashed through a corner post trying to escape. The barbed wire caught his left hind leg, opening a gash that required 47 stitches and 3 weeks of antibiotics. Dr. Martinez, our large animal vet, shook his head as he sutured the wound. These animals don't understand tourists, Clayton. Next time might be worse. But the worst part was watching Sarah. My wife, who'd found peace in this place during the hardest fight of her life, started flinching every time she heard car doors slamming in our driveway. Her oncologist noticed the stress affecting her treatment response. Blood pressure up, white cell count down, sleep patterns disrupted. I had to do something, but I needed evidence. So I went shopping. Military training teaches you that intelligence wins wars, not firepower. I spent $800 at the electronics store on 6 trail cameras with motion sensors, the same passive infrared technology we used for perimeter security overseas. I positioned them with overlapping coverage zones, concealed in fence posts and tree branches, creating a surveillance net that would make the Pentagon proud. The cameras revealed something interesting. Brenda wasn't just bringing HOA members through my property, she was charging them. I caught her on video collecting $50 bills from neighbors who wanted to experience what she advertised on the Meadowbrook Heights Facebook page as authentic Texas ranch tours. Here's a knowledge nugget for you. Trail cameras use passive infrared sensors that detect heat signatures from up to 40 feet away. They're motion-activated, weatherproof, and can run for 6 months on lithium batteries. Same technology the military uses, but you can buy them at any sporting goods store. Translation: you can document trespassing professionally without spending a fortune. But catching Brenda in the act wasn't a deterrent. It was just intelligence gathering. She spotted my cameras on her 3rd tour and actually smiled and waved at them. "Can't stop me from using my road," she called out, like she was daring me to try. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing the footage on my laptop. 47 separate trespassing incidents in 3 weeks, each one time-stamped and GPS tagged. I cross-referenced the dates with HOA meeting minutes that Brenda posted online, looking for patterns. The pattern was chilling. Every ranch tour happened exactly 1 day before HOA votes on rural property concerns. She was using my land to build political support for whatever scheme she had planned next. I called my Marine buddy Jake, who'd become a lawyer after his discharge. He reviewed the video footage and whistled low. "Clayton, this is clear criminal trespassing with commercial intent, but proving she's charging for access to your property requires more documentation." "What kind of documentation?" "Financial records, advertising materials, witness statements. Build a case that shows pattern and intent." That night, Sarah found the energy to plant a new section of her butterfly garden, zinnias and cosmos that would bloom in late summer. She worked slowly, stopping frequently to rest, but her eyes had that determined sparkle I'd fallen in love with 28 years ago. "No one drives through your flowers again," I promised her. "I know, honey. I trust you." But trust wasn't going to be enough. This was just the beginning. 2 weeks later, Brenda made her boldest move yet. She filed an official claim with the county for a right-of-way easement on my property and announced plans to install an HOA security booth right next to my gate. The letter from county planning hit my mailbox like a legal grenade. Notice of easement claim hearing, Meadowbrook Heights HOA versus Rivers Ranch property. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday at 2 p.m. "Community safety requires monitoring rural activities," Brenda explained to the local newspaper. "We need to ensure agricultural operations don't impact our neighborhood's property values. The immediate impact was devastating. My bank received a county inquiry about property boundaries and promptly froze my equity line of credit. Sarah's medical bills were stacking up, and we'd been counting on that credit to cover her treatments. The insurance company launched their own investigation into alleged commercial use of our ranch, threatening to void our homeowner's policy. Neighbors started asking questions. "Is it true you're running some kind of business out there, Clayton?" The doubt in their voices cut deeper than Brenda's lies. I couldn't sleep that night, lying next to Sarah in our bed, listening to her oxygen concentrator cycling on and off. My hands were shaking again, the first time since Afghanistan. This wasn't combat, but it felt like war. The next morning, I hired a professional surveyor and drove to the county courthouse. If Brenda wanted to play legal games, I'd show her what 28 years of military precision looked like applied to civilian problems. The surveyor, a grizzled old-timer named Pete, used GPS equipment accurate to within 2 inches, the same satellite technology that guided artillery strikes overseas. "This is military-grade surveying, Clayton. We'll know exactly where every boundary line runs." Here's something most people don't know. Professional survey equipment uses the same GPS satellite constellation as military targeting systems. It can pinpoint property boundaries with surgical precision, and those measurements hold up in any court. Translation: when someone claims your land, get it surveyed professionally. Emotions don't win property disputes, documentation does. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disappointment. I spent 6 hours in the basement records room, photographing decades of property deeds and easement documents. Military training kicked in, systematic intelligence gathering, pattern recognition, attention to detail. What I found made my blood run cold. There were no historical easements on my property. None. The previous owner had never granted access rights to anyone. That road existed because it was convenient, not because it was legal. But here's the mini twist. The survey revealed something Brenda didn't expect. Her precious HOA water line was illegally crossing 3 other properties besides mine. For 15 years, she'd been trespassing on multiple ranches, not just mine. I drove straight to my neighbors. Tom Henderson, who ran cattle on the section north of me. Maria Santos, whose family had owned their land for 4 generations. Bill Crawford, a retired teacher who raised quarter horses. "You're telling me this HOA line crosses my property without permission?" Tom asked, studying the survey maps spread across his kitchen table. 15 years of illegal trespassing, I confirmed. And I bet you never saw a penny in compensation. That's when the real story emerged. Brenda had been systematically intimidating all the rural property owners, threatening lawsuits, filing nuisance complaints, creating paper trails to justify her enforcement actions. She wasn't just targeting me, she was running a campaign against anyone who didn't fit her suburban vision. The county planning meeting was held in a sterile conference room with fluorescent lights that hummed like angry wasps. Brenda arrived in her navy business suit, carrying a leather portfolio and radiating the confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight. I came in my cleanest jeans, carrying a banker's box full of documentation. "Mr. Rivers," the planning director said, "Mrs. Winchester claims historical usage rights to access community water infrastructure." I opened my box. "Sir, I've got 40 years of property records, professional survey documentation, and evidence that no such easement has ever existed. Furthermore, I can prove the HOA's water system is illegally crossing multiple private properties without compensation or permission." Brenda's face went white. That's impossible. We have documentation." "Ma'am, I'd be very interested to see that documentation." The planning director leaned forward. "Mrs. Winchester, do you have legal easement documents for the property access you're claiming?" I watched her squirm for 30 seconds of beautiful silence before she said, "I'll need to consult with our attorney." "Then this hearing is postponed pending documentation review," the director said. As we filed out of the room, the planning director pulled me aside. "Off the record, Mr. Rivers. Her claim has no merit, but she's got political connections. Document everything." That night, Sarah was strong enough to sit on the porch. We watched a pair of monarch butterflies dancing around her zinnia patch as the sun set behind our pastures. "How'd it go today?" she asked. "We're winning," I said, "but this isn't over." Brenda Winchester didn't take losing gracefully. 2 days after the county meeting, she filed a formal nuisance complaint against our ranch, demanding what she called agricultural modernization and threatening daily fines of $500 until we complied with her undefined standards. The complaint was 12 pages of legal gibberish that basically boiled down to, "This cattle ranch makes our neighborhood look bad, so shut it down." She claimed our livestock operations violated health codes, our structures needed inspection, and our property was reducing home values in Meadowbrook Heights by an average of $15,000 per house. The county inspector showed up the next Tuesday morning in a white pickup truck with official plates. His name was Rodriguez, and he looked like a man who'd rather be fishing than dealing with HOA drama. "Mr. Rivers, I've got to investigate this complaint, but between you and me, it looks like bureaucratic harassment. Your operation is cleaner than most facilities I inspect." Still, he had to follow protocol. 3 hours of walking my property, checking feed storage, water systems, and waste management. Everything passed, but the stress was eating Sarah alive. She collapsed during her chemo session that Thursday and spent the night in the hospital. I sat in that plastic chair next to her bed, listening to monitors beep and watching IV drips, making a decision that would change everything. The smell of antiseptic couldn't mask the scent of fear in that room. Fear that stress was winning the battle against cancer. That weekend, I drove back to the courthouse. 3 days in the records room, photographing every document I could find. Military intelligence training from Afghanistan, applied to Texas property law. I was looking for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that would explain Brenda's confidence. Here's what most people don't understand about public records. They're public for a reason. Property deeds, permit applications, tax records, it's all there if you know how to look. I spent 72 hours learning the paper trail of my own neighborhood, and that's when I found the smoking gun. The original water easement that Brenda claimed gave her access rights had expired in 1987. Expired, as in no longer valid, no longer legal. The county had sent official notice to the HOA requiring renewal, but nobody ever responded. The legal department assumed compliance and never followed up. For 15 years, Brenda Winchester had been trespassing on my property and 3 others, operating an entire water system on expired permits. She was running a sophisticated criminal enterprise, and she probably didn't even realize it. Here's a knowledge nugget that could save your property. Easements aren't permanent unless specifically written that way. Most utility easements require periodic renewal, and if they expire, the property owner can revoke access. Always check the original documents. Translation: just because someone's been using your land doesn't mean they have the legal right to keep using it. I called my lawyer buddy Jake and read him the findings over the phone. "Clayton, this is bigger than trespassing. Document forgery is a federal crime when it involves property rights. If she's been falsifying easement documents, we're talking fraud charges." I spent the next week gathering evidence from my neighbors. Tom Henderson had his own horror stories. Maria Santos showed me threatening letters about agricultural compliance. Bill Crawford had photographs of Brenda's people measuring his horse pastures without permission. The pattern was undeniable. Brenda wasn't just an entitled HOA president. She was systematically targeting rural property owners to force them into compliance or buyouts. This was economic warfare disguised as community development. My trail cameras captured something interesting during this investigation phase. Brenda's husband, a quiet man who worked for the county water department, came to my gate at midnight on a Wednesday. He stood there for 20 minutes, studying my fence posts and gate structure, taking measurements with a tape measure. The mini twist came the next morning. I was reviewing the footage when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. "Mr. Rivers, this is David Winchester, Brenda's husband. I need to talk to you." "About what, sir?" "About documents my wife has been creating. I think you should know what you're really dealing with." We met at a diner in town, away from both our neighborhoods. David Winchester looked like a man carrying a heavy burden. He slid a manila folder across the table. "These are copies of the original easement documents from 1987, the real ones. What Brenda's been showing the county, those aren't legitimate." Yo. Inside the folder were photocopies of the actual expired easement, the county's renewal notice, and something that made my coffee taste like ash. Forged documents with signatures, notary stamps, and county seals that had been created sometime in 2005. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because what she's doing isn't just wrong, it's criminal, and I won't be part of it anymore." That night, Sarah was strong enough to plant bulbs for next spring's flowers. As we worked together in the fading light, I told her what I'd learned. So she's been lying to everyone? For 15 years. What happens now? I looked at those bulbs in the dark soil, thinking about flowers that would bloom long after this war was over. Now we finish this. The criminal conspiracy was even worse than I'd imagined. David Winchester's documents told a story of systematic fraud that went back nearly 2 decades. In 1987, the original water easement across my property and 3 others had expired exactly as scheduled. The county sent certified letters requiring renewal applications, proper compensation, and updated legal agreements, standard procedure for infrastructure crossing private property. The HOA never responded, not a single letter, phone call, or filing. From 1988 to 2003, they operated their entire water system illegally, hoping nobody would notice or care. Small-town bureaucracy being what it is, they were right. The legal department assumed compliance, filed the paperwork in some dusty cabinet, and moved on to more pressing issues. Then in 2004, Brenda Winchester became HOA president. Smart woman, pharmaceutical sales background, understood how systems worked. She discovered the expired easement problem during a routine audit and realized her entire community was vulnerable to water shutoffs if property owners ever figured out the truth. So she solved it the criminal way. David Winchester had copies of everything. The forged easement documents, backdated to 1985 with signatures from people who'd been dead for years. Notary stamps from officials who'd never notarized anything related to water rights. Even a county seal that hadn't been adopted until 1995, mysteriously appearing on documents supposedly created a decade earlier. The document forensics are amateur hour, Jake told me over the phone after reviewing David's evidence. Digital printing on papers supposedly from 1985, photocopied signatures, notary seal from someone who died in 1990. Any federal investigator would spot this in 5 minutes. But here's what made it a sophisticated criminal enterprise. Brenda had done this on 3 other properties besides mine. 4 separate acts of document forgery representing over $500,000 in stolen property rights over 15 years. This isn't just trespassing anymore, Jake continued. We're talking federal wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, civil rights violations under color of law. She could be looking at decades in federal prison. The power dynamic had completely shifted. For months, I'd been playing defense, reacting to Brenda's moves, feeling like the underdog fighting superior forces. Classic asymmetric warfare, small unit against a larger, better-equipped enemy. But now I realized the truth. I wasn't fighting a superior enemy. I was dealing with a criminal who'd been running a bluff for 15 years, hoping nobody would call her on it. David Winchester's revelation changed everything. She's convinced herself the forgeries are legal because they've been unchallenged for so long. That's her weakness. She thinks she's untouchable. The psychological profile made sense. Brenda Winchester had spent 15 years believing her own lies, surrounding herself with people who validated her version of reality. She'd never faced serious opposition because small-town property owners don't usually have the resources to fight HOA legal teams. But she'd never dealt with a marine engineer who specialized in finding weak points in complex systems. I spread David's documents across my kitchen table, studying them with the same attention I'd once applied to roadside bomb patterns. Signatures, dates, notary seals, paper stock, printing methods. Everything told a story if you knew how to read it. Sarah joined me at the table, her oxygen tank humming softly beside her chair. Even weakened by chemo, her mind was sharp as ever. She's been stealing from everyone, Sarah said, tracing the timeline with her finger. 200 families paying water bills for stolen access. 4 property owners losing rights they never gave up. How much money has she taken? I did the math. Average water bill increase over 15 years, multiplied by 200 homes, factored for infrastructure costs that should have been properly negotiated. Conservative estimate $1.8 million in fraudulent charges. This isn't just about our ranch anymore, I told Sarah. This is about justice for an entire community. The legal strategy crystallized in my mind like a tactical plan coming together. Document the fraud, expose it publicly, coordinate with law enforcement, and make sure the evidence was so overwhelming that Brenda couldn't lie her way out. But first, I needed to set the trap. Because I had a feeling that when Brenda realized her criminal empire was crumbling, she'd make one final desperate move, and I wanted to be ready for her. Military operations succeed through planning, preparation, and precision execution. Brenda Winchester was about to learn what happens when you declare war on a marine engineer who specializes in hydraulic systems. My first call was to a security contractor in Houston who specialized in embassy protection. Vehicle barriers, specifically. The technology that protects American diplomats in hostile territories was available to Texas ranchers who could afford it. "You want bollards that'll stop a Lexus SUV at 15 miles per hour?" the contractor asked. "That's easy. Question is, you want them damaged or destroyed?" "Completely disabled," I said, "but legal. I want documentation that proves they were warned and chose to ignore it." The system he designed was beautiful in its simplicity. 2 steel bollards, 6 inches in diameter, hydraulically operated, designed to retract flush with the ground when deactivated. When triggered, they'd rise to 3 feet in height in half a second, powered by 3,000 psi hydraulic pressure, enough force to stop a dump truck. Here's the technical knowledge you need. Hydraulic bollard systems use the same pressure principles as aircraft carrier catapults. Compressed fluid in a closed system creates tremendous mechanical advantage. A small pump can generate enough force to destroy any civilian vehicle. Translation: the technology that protects embassies worldwide can protect your private property too. The sensor system was equally sophisticated, weight-detecting pressure plates embedded in the road surface, calibrated for vehicles over 3,000 pounds traveling faster than 5 miles per hour. Motion sensors provided backup detection, and everything fed into a central controller with remote override capability. Total cost, $12,000 installed. About what I'd been spending annually on Brenda's property damage. But the physical trap was only one element of the strategy. I needed legal documentation that would stand up in federal court. Jake connected me with a prosecutor friend who specialized in white-collar crime. Jennifer Martinez had spent 10 years with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit before moving to Texas. She reviewed David Winchester's evidence and whistled appreciatively. "This is the cleanest document forgery case I've seen in years. Federal prosecutors love slam dunks like this." I filed comprehensive complaints with the county sheriff, district attorney, state attorney general, and FBI field office. Each package included the same evidence: original expired easements, forged documents, financial analysis, victim statements, and property damage documentation. The investigation timeline coordinated perfectly with Brenda's schedule. Every spring, the HOA held its annual water system inspection, inviting county officials, board members, and residents to tour the infrastructure. Public relations exercised to justify their management fees. This year's inspection was scheduled for April 15th, perfect opportunity for maximum exposure. I recruited allies systematically: Tom Henderson, Maria Santos, and Bill Crawford, the other property owners affected by Brenda's fraud. The local veterans organization who'd been looking for a good fight since the VA hospital controversy. Our County Ranchers Association, always eager to oppose suburban development pressure. Jennifer Martinez arranged for federal investigators to monitor the situation. We can't arrest her until she commits a federal crime in our presence, but document forgery gives us jurisdiction once the evidence is solid. The media strategy was equally important. Our local newspaper editor, a crusty old-timer named Pete Hoffman, had been suspicious of HOA politics for years. He agreed to investigate the water fraud story, pending a triggering event that would justify front-page coverage. I installed the bollard system on a Tuesday morning. Professional installation crew, permits filed with the county, warning signs posted according to state requirements. Private property, authorized vehicles only, security measures in place. The bollards were invisible when retracted, just 2 circular covers flush with the gravel road. But the control system in my house showed their status on a laptop screen. Armed, sensors active, hydraulic pressure nominal. High-resolution cameras covered every angle, motion activated, infrared capable, 4K video with audio recording, tamper-proof housing, encrypted wireless transmission to cloud storage, admissible in federal court. Sarah helped me test the system that evening, driving her small Honda over the sensors at various speeds. Below 5 miles per hour, nothing happened. The bollards stayed down. Above that threshold, warning lights activated before the bollards would deploy. "It's like a mousetrap," Sarah observed, watching the laptop display. "But for someone who's been stealing cheese for 15 years. The final preparation was psychological. I studied Brenda's patterns, her personality, her triggers. Entitled people don't back down when challenged. They escalate. She'd spent 15 years believing she was legally untouchable. When that illusion cracked, she'd make a desperate move to prove her power. I was counting on it. The week before the water inspection, I sent Brenda Winchester a certified letter. Professional, polite, direct. Please use public access roads for all future HOA business. Private property will be protected by security measures as of April 10th. She signed for it on a Thursday. By Friday, the neighborhood gossip network was buzzing with rumors about terrorist tactics and veteran extremism. Sunday night, I set the bollards to active mode. Monday morning, I sat on my porch with Sarah, drinking coffee and watching monarchs dance around her butterfly garden. "You ready for this?" she asked. "Been ready my whole life." Brenda Winchester's response to my security measures was swift, panicked, and completely illegal. The first sign of desperation came Tuesday morning. My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. Angry calls from Meadowbrook Heights residents who'd received emergency notices about a water crisis caused by uncooperative rural property owner. "Is it true you're holding our water system hostage?" asked Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow who'd never spoken to me before. "Ma'am, I've never interfered with your water supply. The HOA has been illegally accessing infrastructure across my property, and I've installed security to protect my rights." But the damage was done. Brenda's emergency HOA meeting drew over 100 residents to the community center. I watched from my truck in the parking lot as she addressed the crowd through the windows, gesticulating dramatically at poster boards covered with charts and diagrams. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Afterward, residents filed past my truck, some glaring, others looking confused. Tom Henderson stopped to talk. "She's claiming you're demanding ransom payments for water access," he said. Showed financial projections about rate increases if they have to pay for proper easements. What did the residents say? Split down the middle. Half believe her sob story, half are asking why they never knew about easement issues before. That afternoon, Brenda escalated to direct threats. A certified letter from a Houston law firm demanded for immediate removal of illegal barriers. The language was aggressive, threatening $2 million in damages for intentional interference with community infrastructure. The letter claimed I was violating federal interstate commerce laws, state utility regulations, and county emergency access requirements. Pure legal gibberish, but intimidating enough to scare most property owners into compliance. Jake read the letter and laughed. This attorney has no idea what his client's really done. He's threatening federal action against someone who's documented federal crimes by his client. But the real escalation came Thursday night. My trail cameras caught Brenda's husband David creeping around my gate at 2 a.m. examining the bollard installation with a flashlight. He spent 20 minutes measuring, photographing, and testing the sensor zones. Friday morning brought the mini twist I'd been expecting. David Winchester called my cell phone directly. "Mr. Rivers, I need to warn you about something. Brenda's planning to sabotage your security system during the water inspection Monday. She's hired people to disable it." "What kind of people?" "Men with tools. She's convinced the residents that your barriers are illegal, and she's planning to remove them in front of everyone as a demonstration of community action." This was perfect. Conspiracy to commit vandalism, destruction of property, criminal mischief, all federal crimes when committed to further an existing fraud scheme. "David, why are you telling me this?" "Because I filed for divorce yesterday. I won't be part of her criminal enterprise anymore." I immediately called Jennifer Martinez, the federal prosecutor. She was fascinated by the development. Conspiracy to destroy evidence in a federal investigation? That's obstruction of justice. We can arrest her the moment those tools touch your property. Saturday morning, I upgraded the security system. Additional cameras, motion sensors, and a direct emergency line to the sheriff's department. If Brenda wanted to commit federal crimes in front of witnesses, I'd document every second. The psychological pressure was getting to her. Social media posts became increasingly erratic. Friday evening, she live-streamed a rant about rural extremism threatening family safety. The video went viral on the neighborhood Facebook groups, but not in the way she expected. Comments poured in questioning her version of events. Why wasn't easement renewal handled properly? What documentation exists for these access rights? How much has this cost us over the years? Her responses became defensive, then angry, then desperate. "You people don't understand legal complexities. I've been protecting this community for 15 years while ungrateful residents question my expertise." Sunday afternoon brought the final escalation. Brenda organized what she called a convoy for community water rights. 15 HOA vehicles planning to drive through my ranch simultaneously during Monday's inspection. She announced the plan on Facebook Live. Tomorrow, we're going to demonstrate that no one threatens our community's water supply. Rural extremists need to understand that 200 families won't be intimidated by one angry veteran. The video revealed everything I needed to know about her mental state. Rapid speech, defensive posture, increasingly wild accusations. This wasn't strategic thinking. This was panic. Jennifer Martinez watched the live stream from her office. She's going to commit multiple federal crimes on camera in front of witnesses while live streaming the evidence. I've never seen a cleaner criminal case. That evening, Sarah and I sat on the porch, watching her butterfly garden bloom in the fading light. Monarchs were arriving for their spring migration, just like she'd planned. Tomorrow's going to be interesting, she said. Tomorrow's going to be justice. Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity that only comes before a perfect storm. Brenda Winchester was about to stage the most spectacular criminal confession in Texas legal history. Her convoy assembled in the Meadowbrook Heights parking lot at 9 a.m. 15 vehicles ranging from soccer mom SUVs to pickup trucks borrowed for the occasion. Brenda had recruited not just HOA board members, but residents convinced they were fighting for their water rights. I watched through binoculars from my porch as she addressed the group like a general preparing for battle. She'd hired what she called a security consultant, a man in tactical gear who looked like he'd been rejected from every legitimate security company in Houston. The plan, according to her continued Facebook live streaming, was simple. Drive through the ranch en masse, overwhelm any security systems through sheer numbers, and physically remove the bollards with crowbars and power tools. We're going to show this rural extremist that community rights supersede individual property claims, she announced to her phone camera. 200 families deserve water, more than one selfish veteran deserves privacy. What she didn't know was that her security consultant was actually an unlicensed private investigator named Marcus Webb, who'd been convicted of fraud in Louisiana and was operating illegally in Texas. Jennifer Martinez had identified him through his license plate during surveillance. At 10:15 a.m., the convoy started moving. 15 vehicles in formation, Brenda's white Lexus in the lead, driving toward my ranch like some suburban militia heading to war. I activated the bollard system from my laptop, armed all cameras, and called the Sheriff's Department emergency line. 15 vehicles approaching for coordinated trespassing, federal investigators standing by. The morning air smelled like blooming bluebonnets and diesel exhaust as Brenda's convoy approached my gate. Sarah sat beside me on the porch in her wheelchair, oxygen tank humming, determined to witness justice in person. "You sure this is going to work?" she asked. "Honey, I spent 28 years preparing for this moment." The convoy slowed at my gate, engines idling while Brenda consulted with her security team. Through her live stream, we could hear her coordination efforts. "Remember, we have every legal right to access community infrastructure. Don't let intimidation tactics stop us." What happened next was the mini-twist that made this case federal prosecutors' dream scenario. As Brenda prepared to drive through my gate, 3 unmarked federal sedans pulled up behind the convoy. FBI agents Jennifer Martinez had positioned for surveillance suddenly found themselves witnesses to conspiracy in progress. But Brenda was too committed to her narrative to back down. Seeing the federal vehicles, she assumed they were county officials supporting her position. She actually waved at the agents and announced into her phone camera, "Even law enforcement recognizes our legitimate community rights." At 10:47 a.m., Brenda Winchester accelerated her white Lexus GX 470 through my gate at approximately 15 miles per hour. The weight sensors triggered, hydraulic pressure engaged. Steel bollards rose from the ground in half a second with a mechanical clang that echoed across the county. Brenda's undercarriage met 3,000 psi of Texas justice. The impact was devastating. Transmission case cracked, oil pan ruptured, radiator destroyed. Her Lexus went from luxury transportation to immobile scrap metal in the time it takes to blink. Steam rose from the engine compartment. Transmission fluid pooled on my gravel road. Her horn blared continuously from the impact damage, creating a soundtrack of mechanical distress that perfectly matched the situation. Brenda was trapped. Forward motion blocked by bollards. Reverse prevented by trailing vehicles, stuck between steel posts, live streaming her humiliation to the internet. The convoy behind her panicked. 15 vehicles trying to reverse simultaneously in a narrow road, blocking each other's escape, creating the kind of traffic nightmare that usually only happens during hurricane evacuations. FBI agent Martinez approached Brenda's disabled vehicle with federal warrant paperwork already prepared. "Mrs. Winchester, you're under arrest for criminal trespassing, conspiracy to commit vandalism, document forgery, wire fraud, mail fraud, and obstruction of justice." Brenda's livestream was still running, broadcasting her arrest to hundreds of viewers who'd been following her community action campaign. Comments exploded with shock, confusion, and slowly dawning understanding of what they'd really been witnessing. "This is illegal," Brenda screamed through her shattered windshield. "I have documentation. I have rights." "Ma'am, your documentation consists of forged federal instruments. You've been operating a criminal enterprise for 15 years. The security consultant tried to flee on foot across my pasture but was tackled by Agent Rodriguez near Sarah's butterfly garden. Watching a criminal get arrested in a field of blooming wildflowers felt like poetic justice. By noon, 3 people were in federal custody, 15 vehicles were impounded as evidence, and the Meadowbrook Heights water crisis was over. The smell of leaked transmission fluid couldn't mask the sweet scent of justice finally served. The scene at my ranch looked like something from a disaster movie, if disasters involved federal arrests and mechanical justice. Brenda Winchester's white Lexus sat disabled between my steel bollards like a monument to criminal stupidity. Steam continued rising from the destroyed engine, and that continuous horn blast created a soundtrack that could probably be heard in the next county. Transmission fluid spread across the gravel in an abstract art pattern that would make Jackson Pollock proud. Within minutes, my ranch became the center of a law enforcement convention. 3 FBI vehicles, 2 county sheriff cruisers, 1 state police unit, and a tow truck that would need heavy-duty equipment to extract Brenda's vehicle from its steel trap. But the real audience was growing by the minute. Word spreads fast in rural Texas, especially when it involves federal arrests and mechanical carnage. Neighboring ranchers arrived on horseback and in pickup trucks. Veterans from the local VFW post came to support one of their own. Even some Meadowbrook Heights residents showed up, drawn by curiosity and the entertainment value of watching their HOA president get arrested on livestream. News crews from 2 different stations were already en route, having monitored Brenda's Facebook Live coverage of what she'd promoted as community action for water rights. Agent Jennifer Martinez took control of the scene with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. She approached Brenda's trapped vehicle with federal warrant paperwork and a voice amplifier that ensured everyone could hear the charges. "Brenda Winchester, you're under arrest for violations of federal fraud statutes, specifically document forgery, wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy to commit vandalism, and obstruction of justice in an ongoing federal investigation." Brenda's response, broadcast live to her Facebook audience, was pure panic mixed with entitled rage. "This is illegal. You can't do this. I have community support. I have rights." "Ma'am, your rights don't include forging federal documents or trespassing on private property." The crowd was growing. Tom Henderson arrived with Maria Santos and Bill Crawford, the other property owners affected by Brenda's 15-year fraud scheme. Local veterans formed an honor guard around Sarah's wheelchair, ensuring she had front-row seats to justice being served. Here's when I delivered my mic drop moment. Walking calmly to the disabled vehicle, I handed Agent Martinez a complete evidence package I'd prepared for this exact situation. "Agent Martinez, this folder contains 15 years of documented fraud, including forged easement documents, financial analysis showing $1.8 million in stolen property rights, and video evidence of criminal trespassing." I paused to look directly at Brenda through her broken windshield. "Ma'am, this is what happens when you declare war on a marine engineer." The crowd erupted in applause. Sarah's oxygen tank couldn't mask her laughter. Even some of the federal agents were grinning. But the real theatrical moment came when I activated my ranch's digital billboard, a purchase I'd made specifically for this day. The message was visible from the road and perfectly framed for news cameras. "Water easement forged, 2005, 15 years of criminal fraud, evidence available to media and investigators." Below that, side-by-side images of the original 1987 easement and Brenda's forged documents, with circles highlighting the obviously falsified signatures and impossible dates. The visual impact was devastating. 200 Meadowbrook Heights residents realized they'd been paying inflated water bills to fund a criminal enterprise. The evidence was so clear that even non-lawyers could understand the fraud scope. News cameras captured everything: the destroyed Lexus, the federal arrest, the evidence billboard, and the growing crowd of witnesses. This was going to be the lead story on every local news station. Marcus Webb, the fake security consultant, provided additional entertainment by trying to escape across my pasture and getting tackled near Sarah's butterfly garden. Agent Rodriguez was practically laughing as he applied handcuffs. "Sir, you're under arrest for unlicensed private investigation, conspiracy to commit vandalism, and being really bad at running." The tow truck operation required special equipment. The bollards had to be hydraulically lowered to extract Brenda's vehicle, which revealed the complete destruction of her undercarriage, $75,000 of German automotive engineering, reduced to scrap metal by $12,000 worth of Texas justice. As they loaded her destroyed Lexus onto the flatbed truck, I couldn't help but notice the irony. Her blessed license plate was now bracketed by bollard scratches, and her "Live, Laugh, Love" bumper sticker was hanging by one corner. The crowd stayed for over an hour, watching the evidence collection, talking to reporters, and sharing stories about 15 years of HOA harassment that finally made sense. This wasn't just about one criminal. It was about a community discovering they'd been victims of systematic fraud. Sarah squeezed my hand as the last federal vehicle left our property. "Think it's over?" I looked at her butterfly garden, where monarchs were landing on blooms that would never be disturbed by unauthorized traffic again. "Honey, it's finally over." Justice moved surprisingly fast once federal prosecutors had video evidence of crimes committed on live stream. Brenda Winchester pled guilty to 7 federal charges 3 months later, accepting a plea agreement that included 4 years in federal prison and $2.3 million in restitution. Her attorney advised her that fighting the charges would only result in additional conspiracy counts and a longer sentence. The evidence was overwhelming: forged documents, video confessions, financial records, and witness testimony from her own husband. David Winchester received immunity in exchange for cooperation, providing prosecutors with insider details about 15 years of systematic fraud. Marcus Webb, the fake security consultant, got 18 months for conspiracy and operating without a license. His criminal record in Louisiana revealed this wasn't his first attempt at privatized law enforcement. The HOA board dissolved completely within 2 weeks of the arrests. Emergency elections brought in new leadership that immediately negotiated legitimate easement agreements with all affected property owners. My ranch received $5,000 annually for legal waterline access, fair compensation that should have been paid decades ago. The class action lawsuit representing 200 Meadowbrook Heights residents settled for $1.8 million, recovering 15 years of overcharges for fraudulent infrastructure costs. Each family received approximately $9,000, plus legal fees covered by Brenda's seized assets. Sarah's medical bills, which had been mounting during the stress of our legal battle, were completely covered by donations from the Veterans Organization and settlement overflow funds. Her oncologist reported that removing the stress dramatically improved her treatment response. My bollard system became a neighborhood attraction. Property rights attorneys from across Texas visited to study the installation, and I started consulting part-time with other property owners facing HOA harassment. Turns out there's a market for military precision applied to civilian property defense. The Spring Water Festival launched 6 months later, funded by settlement money, and designed to celebrate legal water access and community cooperation. Sarah's butterfly garden became the festival centerpiece, attracting monarch researchers from the state university who established a permanent observation station. The festival also served another purpose: education. Displays explaining property rights, easement law, and document authentication helped residents understand how they'd been victimized and how to prevent future fraud. Relations between rural and suburban residents improved dramatically once everyone understood the real story. The new HOA leadership partnered with local ranchers for educational programs, connecting suburban kids with agricultural heritage and environmental conservation. Sarah's health improved remarkably with the stress removed from our lives. Her cancer entered remission 8 months after Brenda's arrest, and her butterfly garden expanded to cover 3 acres of native Texas wildflowers. Fighting for our home brought us closer than 20 years of peace, she told me one evening as we watched monarchs dancing in the sunset. The legal victory established important precedent for property rights in Texas. Agricultural properties now had stronger protection against fraudulent development pressure, and HOA power was limited by stricter oversight requirements. But the most important outcome was personal. Our ranch remained the healing sanctuary Sarah needed during her cancer battle. The butterfly garden flourished undisturbed, attracting monarch migrations that brought joy during her darkest treatment days. From surplus settlement funds, we established the Ranch Rights Legal Defense Fund, providing free legal aid for veterans and rural property owners facing HOA harassment or predatory development pressure. The fund prevents others from suffering the intimidation and financial pressure we'd endured. Jake, my Marine buddy turned lawyer, became the fund's managing attorney, specializing in property rights cases with military precision and veteran determination. 6 months after the arrests, I received a handwritten letter from federal prison. Brenda Winchester, expressing remorse and requesting forgiveness for the pain she'd caused Sarah during cancer treatments. I showed the letter to Sarah, who read it thoughtfully before responding, "Forgiveness is for our healing, not her redemption. I forgive her, but consequences remain." The bollards are still active, though they've never needed to engage again. Word spreads quickly in rural communities about what happens when criminals target the wrong ranch. But that's not the end of the story. 3 months later, another Karen from the next county over tried to claim mineral rights under our land, armed with similarly fraudulent documentation and entitled attitude. Big mistake. If you've got an HOA nightmare story, share it below. I read every comment and respond to questions about property rights defense. And hit subscribe because these Karens never learn, and apparently neither do I. The Ranch Rights Legal Defense Fund is always looking for new cases where military precision can serve civilian justice. Remember, your property rights are worth fighting for, and documentation beats intimidation every single time.